Welcome, everyone, to the BuiltOnAir podcast. This is season 9, episode 6. We're halfway through this season. It's good to be with you. We've got myself, Dan Fellers, and Camille Parks with us. Hello, Camille.
Good morning.
Welcome back. We missed you last week.
Sorry.
It's good. You're allowed. Allie's out this week, so it's just Camille and I. And Camille looks a year wiser today.
Well, just a little bit.
Camille had a birthday last week, so.
I did.
Yeah. So
I'm old.
That's right. I'm still plenty older, so you don't have to worry. All right. Well, as always, on our episodes, we do 4 different segments talking about all things Airtable. Our first one, we'll go through the different communities and talk about what's going on in all the different Airtable communities. Then we'll do a spotlight on our primary sponsor, OnToAir. We'll then do a scripting time, diving deep into a script and learn more about that. Then we will do a field focus on the button field and how you can use that. And then we'll talk about the BuiltOnAir community. And then finally, we'll end with an industry view. So that's the agenda for today. As always, with our Round the Bases, we go through and figure out what people are talking about and what we can learn from that. We always like to start with the Airtable community. And the big news from last week was the maintenance and the downtime. And I was impressed. I was actually up. It was Friday night, 10 o'clock my time. Actually, I guess 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock Pacific, your time. And it was, 5 minutes? I don't know if you watched it or not.
No, I've been joking for the past week that I would be because that was my birthday and it was so much was going on. I actually was not using Airtable at 10 p.m., which is, atypical for me.
There you go. That's good. It forced you to get out. So that's good. But yeah, I was watching. I did get a handful of emails from Zapier while it was down. The API was down. So the big question is, have you noticed any difference?
I haven't. And I feel like if there's some, this is where I get fired if I haven't noticed it.
Yeah. I mean, it hasn't been noticeable. I logged into a client that's an enterprise client and has a pretty large base. And I actually did notice significance on the initial load of the data. It seemed a bit faster, but it wasn't like night and day. So hopefully it was more kind of preparatory for things to come. But I do think there was some speed ups in their database loading. So hopefully that's here to stay and more to come. So that was good. Definitely we'll see what comes from that in the future. All right, next one. This one was interesting. This one was a question about folders and organizing workspaces into folders. And I like this because you get 2 animated people, Bill French and Kavan, going at it a little bit. One day we're going to get Bill and Kavan on at the same time and just give them a topic to go at it. It'd be good. So Bill we've already had Kavan on. Bill's coming on. Bill's scheduled to join us. But if we got the 2 of them, that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so talking about folders, how to organize all your workspaces. And there was kind of some back and forth between Bill and Kavan on different strategies and pricing aspects, how that plays into it. Any thoughts on folder organization?
Yeah, I think it was a good point to bring up because it's such a simple sort of move, allowing people to move things into folders. It's a thing that everyone's used to, and it's not a foreign concept to a lot of, I guess, similar sorts of products. But the point that was raised was Airtable's pricing is based on workspace, and one of the main reasons why you would separate things across workspaces is to have finer control over permissions. And so if you were to allow subfolders within a workspace, it follows that you would want to apply different permissions to the individual folders within a workspace, which sort of negates the sort of strategy that they've based their pricing structure on. So they would have to make adjustments to make that make sense financially, I think, from their perspective. And there's arguments to be made about workspace based pricing not being the best just to begin with.
Right.
And I think many people would prefer folders, but I think if you add the concept of folders, you don't need workspaces anymore, if that makes sense. Like if you change everything to be like Google Drive, where you just have a drive and as many folders and subfolders as you need, I think that is ideally how I would like to structure things, but you would need to develop a pricing model that would support that.
Yeah. I think, that decision, I'm sure that was as far, I imagine workspaces was there from day one and just kind of how they set it up. And now they're years into it and might be rethinking, what makes sense. So I think they haven't decided fully, what their long-term pricing structure looks like. And so until then, I doubt they make any changes to adding folders or anything until they determine that pricing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's definitely good back and forth, good points on both sides of what they should do and things of that nature. But I don't foresee folders coming to workspaces anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't. I've heard no whispers, so yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure there. So, anyways, good discussion there. All right, next one. This is an oldie but goodie. So originally started in 2017, brought up recently, and just thinking about this. So the question is account switching. So especially if you're a consultant or work with lots of clients, switching in and out of accounts within Airtable, you pretty much have to log out and log back in. So people are asking for ways to easily switch between accounts so that you can get into your client accounts pretty quickly. And so this was brought back up. It was originally asked in 2017 and more people, and it's been 3 years, people saying, come on, Airtable, we know you can do this. Again, this is probably similar to the other question about folders, is because you can get a base or a workspace can be shared with you. In theory, you could have one account and just share, and get access to others, but then that would get billed. And so sometimes it's easier to log in separately. And so it kind of gets tricky trying to do that. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, that's also tough, and I don't know what the right answer is, but it's right now, whoever owns the workspace pays for it. But like you said, if you share it with, 15 people and they all have more or less the same amount of access and permissions as you do, they're not charged, but you are. But what you could, in theory, do is make as many bases or workspaces as you want with, wait, no. What I'm saying doesn't make sense. I'm just now realizing, because you're charged by the number of editor permission users. Yeah. But it still only goes to that one person, and there's no way to split it amongst the accounts, which could be an issue, I think, for some companies, because it means you have to make sure that you have one company account that sets up all of your workspaces.
Yeah, Yeah. So anybody struggling with this, I'll tell you what I do, because I do log into many different Airtable accounts. So there's a Chrome extension called sessionbox.io that allows you to have, if you're using Chrome, have different tabs that have different sessions. So you can actually, and then you can save your sessions. So if I open up mine, I've got many Airtable logins that I've got access to, and I just click on it and it will automatically log me into that one. So it's free for personal use. There is a paid version for commercial use, and very, very useful. It's a lifesaver. It would be a pain to have to log out and log into each of those every time. So check out sessionbox.io if this is a challenge for you to have to log in and out. Looks like, David, that could work for you if you're listening. All right, that was it for the Airtable community. Not a whole lot. I think, they're not going to release any new features with the database upgrade. So now that the database is upgraded, let's see, maybe they've got some new features that might be coming out this week. We shall see. All right, next one, on to Reddit community. So I know a lot of people like dark mode. So this is a question about, is there a dark mode in Airtable? I know a lot of people like that. I typically don't do dark mode. I probably should for the eyes, but if you are looking for dark mode, Airtable doesn't support one natively, but there are Chrome extensions and browser extensions that do that, and they're suggested. There's some suggestions in this thread, so worth checking out. I remember we saw a screenshot of a dark mode of Airtable base a week or two ago, and we're trying to figure out if that was natural, but I'm assuming that came from a Chrome extension.
Yeah, I know there's a bunch of different tools that let you do that with any website, and it would be nice, I think, if it were available, especially for the desktop app. I am a fairly recent converter into using dark mode for most of my apps. So, for a while it didn't bother me.
Yeah. And are you using an extension?
I'm not, because it doesn't bother me that much. But
so if they have it, you'll use it.
Yeah, I'll switch over if they make it available.
Gotcha. Makes sense. All right, next one. This one's a big one. I think you know a little bit about this one. So our friend Chris over at the Facebook Airtable community shared, and I know they talked about it on their weekly YouTube chat. And I think you were on that episode as well, so you might have some insights here. So he shared a link to a live episode with Billy Littlefield from Airtable, and they went through. Actually, I guess there was more people on the episode from Airtable, and it was kind of some of their developers and talking about what's going on within the product, and gave some good insights into what's coming. And so I'm going to share some of what Chris took some screenshots and shared them with the Facebook community that you should join as well. It's a good community of thousands of Airtable users within Facebook, but let's check out some of these screenshots that I think are interesting. So one of them was the future of sync. So they shared about bi-directional syncing between their different syncing sources. So Salesforce, big one, so that it will automatically sync back and forth. So two-way syncing between Airtable and Salesforce, or any of their other sources that can perform a two-way sync. So I think that is pretty powerful. It gives insight into, I think you can tell from their product development, but that they think this is a pretty critical element of Airtable's future, is being able to sync to other sources. So I think that's pretty cool. I do think for sync to really shine, they gotta be able to increase the record limit. It's just the volume of data that's in these other systems that they're trying to sync with will just bog down Airtable's limits. So once they open that up,
I think there's a sort of 3 limitation thing with the current syncing. It's only one directional. So if they make it bidirectional or two-way sync, like the slide is saying, that'd be great. Right now, you can only have 3 sources synced into a single table. I think that limit should probably be 10. I can see people wanting like 100 different things all going into one, and that's, a lot. But 10 seems like a nice round number that gets to a lot of what smaller kind of companies sort of need sometimes. And then the third one is the limit of the total number of records you could have in a base. So once those 3 are adjusted, I think native syncing in Airtable would be a lot more powerful.
Yeah, that would be cool. So that's one of them. There's another one that I'm maybe more excited about. Let's see here. Actually, there's more comments. All right, this one. So there'd been rumors and hints within the Airtable community of custom apps coming into custom views. This, I think, is the first public information shared on that regard. So there's a screenshot that shows all the custom apps within the sidebar, but also custom views within the actual body of the Airtable. So basically being able to generate a custom view that takes the full screen. So this I'm excited about. I'm sure you are as well as a developer.
Yes. So last week was sort of a whirlwind of Airtable-based announcements, I guess. They had their weekly table talk, and they had their AMA, their first Ask Me Anything. Both involved Taylor Savage, and who's on the product team at Airtable and is pretty involved with like the developer community. And then there was this event that you have the screenshots from with Billy Littlefield, and all 3 of those events talked about the sort of move to making it easier for people to develop customized views. And there's not a whole lot of information that has been revealed because it's still very much under development, and it probably won't see any sort of beta until, I'm guessing, 2023. That's like no one said that number. Yeah. I'm guessing based on the amount of information that I have been told at this point. But what Taylor had said was he was talking about the move from Gantt, which used to be an app and is now a view, and now Timeline, more recently, used to be an app, is now a view. And he was saying if you were to look at the code, if you went in the inspector in Chrome and looked at how Timeline interacts, it's the same code as it was when it was an app. It's now a view. So I think what they're doing is making it so that the same sort of scripting environment developers are used to now with the custom apps development, expanding it to being able to develop a custom view. That is my interpretation of all that I have heard in the past week or so. And it's a long way out, but it's very promising that's the move they're sort of getting, because apps are great, but views are a much more core piece of Airtable functionality. For longtime users, you may remember that apps didn't used to exist. It used to only be views. And then they sort of introduced apps. And then years later, they introduced the app development environment so third parties can make their own apps. But views have been at the core of Airtable since like the get-go. So making those custom, I think, will build to a much stronger product overall.
Yeah, that was the thought I had as far as the Gantt and the timeline. So they've proven that it's doable. Now they just have to open it up to the developer community, which both Camille and I are a part of. So definitely fingers crossed. Hopefully it's not 2023, 2022. Hopefully
That's just me being pessimistic. Because, I mean, it could come sooner, but if I say 2023, I'll be happier when it comes a little bit earlier.
There you go. That works. So cool. So there was one other that just talking about the automation and it being kind of more of a programming environment, maybe hinting towards something similar to like an Integramat where you can really build more advanced functionality. So we might see more along those lines. But even, we talked about when they released this new view here of automations that it was clear they were moving in kind of this direction. I don't think you make that UI change without thinking down the road. So
yeah, it was too much room to give a strictly linear process. So I think we're going to get branching automations at some point. Still a guess, but I'm pretty solid about that one.
Yeah, for sure. So so those were kind of some of the insights from that episode, and we'll see if they do that again. We'll try to get the word out. It was kind of this one. The other ones, they're normal table talk and AMA. I think were better advertised. This one.
I hadn't heard. That was the one that I hadn't been to of the three because I never heard of it. But the other two, they posted on the forums. It was on Twitter. So
Yep. So good stuff coming. I always love seeing what Airtable is thinking as far as the future of the product. So anytime there's something public out there, I want to make sure we share it with the community. All right, moving on to Twitter. Let's see what we got here. I got to refresh page here. This one is an article. I watched it all. Looks like I'm bugging out here.
Yeah, I can't see your screen right now. Well, I can see it, but there's nothing.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think I've got some internet. It's loading still. So VentureBeat did a presentation with Zapier and Airtable, I believe. Actually, I think it's with just Zapier. Yeah, so just Zapier, but talking about how Zapier uses Airtable. So Zapier is a heavy customer of Airtable. They use it for all their stuff. I actually did have Airtable. So I had one of the co-founders, Andrew. I haven't heard much regarding his name. So this is one I'm going to add to my list to watch the replay of this. So if you're interested to see a real life use case of how a company like Zapier uses Airtable, check this one out. And we'll see if that one's any good. So I'll watch that, and then next time I'll give an update if there's anything worthwhile in there. All right. This one I just think was cool. So this is somebody who started a business, and they basically say, anytime I build a business or an app, I start with Airtable. And he gives his process of starting a new app and how Airtable fits into that. So if you have an app idea, and by app, he's not talking about like an Airtable app. I think he's talking about kind of any kind of general purpose web app. And using Airtable as the backend database, he's not necessarily talking about Airtable apps, just apps in general. So this tweet is pretty cool. If you've got ideas that you're not sure where to get started, this could give a good framework and how Airtable can help in that effort. So definitely worthwhile. We've had on previous episodes people mentioning, 7-figure, I think there was an 8-figure company who's built entirely on top of Airtable. So you can build businesses on Airtable. That's a good way. All right, that ends our around the bases and what's going on with the Airtable community. So you are now up to date with everything being discussed. Next, we're talk about OntoAir. OntoAir is the primary sponsor of the Built on Air podcast, and I'm the founder of OntoAir. It's a suite of tools that help you run your business on Airtable, a variety of different ways that you can enhance your Airtable experience and workflows. Today, we're going to talk about, we just released a new article that goes deep into our integration with Google Sheets. So if you want to get your data from Airtable into Google Sheets, this article is the one that you should be reading. And it's very powerful. It talks about how you can actually build charts within your Google Sheets and dynamically convert those charts into images. So something that you can't do within Airtable charts is like extract that chart as an image to be populated into a document or something. By using Google Sheets and their charting, you can do that use case. There's a good video that goes with it, so great walkthrough, everything going on there. So check it out. It's in our resources section, our tutorials and guides, and very powerful stuff. So you can actually migrate, you can sync an entire view or table over into a sheet, or you can do on a per record basis. So you can use, I've used Google Sheets as like a template for invoices. We also have support for Google Docs, but there are some advantages to doing templates and things like that within Google Sheets as well. So if you have any needs for templates and things like that, or getting your data into a Google Sheet, check out OntoAir Actions and our Google integrations. So that is our OntoAir Spotlight. Now we're going to move on to scripting time. So in scripting time is a chance, if you are new to scripting or even experienced, it's a great way to learn more about scripting and how it can enhance your Airtable experience. So what we're going to be looking at is if you haven't already, if you go into add an app and you click on this scripts tab, there's actually a growing library. It could be better. I probably need to add to this library, but I haven't yet. But Airtable has a lot, and there's other people that have added. Kavan's got a few in there. And these are basically scripts that will automatically install into your scripting app, and you can do them. And if you're learning how to script, these are great ways to see existing code that's working, and you can kind of go line by line. So that's what we're going to do now. I chose this delete duplicates, which is basically a way that it will automatically find and delete duplicates based off of the field values within a single table. So you would just click add and it would automatically populate into here. And then now if we go into the editor, let's take a look at this code. Sometimes you gotta do it multiple times to get it to pop full screen. So let's look at this. So we've got right here this input.config. What that does is this will generate a UI that allows for asking information. It generates a form that you can actually see over here on the right that asks for information from the user that can then be used to inside of your automation. And the cool thing is they don't need to do this every time. So it will actually save the information that was entered. And then the next time you come, it will already be configured. You can always click on the settings button to come back to it like this to see it. So it's always there, but it's a way to store information from the user. So it's basically asking, so depending on this field right here or this function, so this is asking for which table that do you want to run it on, the first identifying field, the second identifying field. So this is asking for a field, this parent table, which is here. So these maps in this first choice. And my internet, there we go, I'm back. You can then extract that information from the settings like so, and then now these are variables that you can use inside of your script. So now we go through here. I'll come back to this choose function, which will be used in a second. And then here, this I thought was interesting. I've never used this. I'm pretty sure that's the same as just doing this, which is the syntax I use. So this is an object. This is an array. So an array is just when you have multiple items. So it could be an array of strings, or it could be an array of objects. But these brackets signify that it's multiple items. This object is a single object that has key and value fields associated with it. So that's a different syntax there. So now we're basically getting all of the records from our table, and they are being a good citizen, and they pass in only the fields that they need, so that it doesn't give the error. If you remove this, it would pull all fields, but it would give you a warning sign. So this is a way to just limit it and say, I only care about these 3 fields. So just return those in my array. So now it's just looping through all the records that got returned from our selection out of the table. And this is interesting. So what they need to do is they need to generate a unique identifier using the 2 fields that were picked in our form. So we have our first field and our second field. And so right here, they're generating an array. You see right here, we have our array start and our array end. And then it's just got 2 items in it, the value from our first field and the value from our second field. And then it's using JSON.stringify, which basically will convert this object into a string value called JSON representation of an object. And so now that string value can be used for comparison purposes. And so here we're basically doing a check to say, have we already found a key that has the same value in the first and second ID? If we have, and it's already in our existing array, then we need to, that means that we found a duplicate because the values are the same. The first ID and the second ID are the same. So that means we've already seen this match before, and now we need to choose which one we're going to keep and which one we're going to discard. So this choose function now uses that third field, this comparison field, to determine which one we're going to keep. And so it basically says if whichever one has the greater value. So that's so this comparison field is looking for the higher value. The higher value you're going to keep, the lower value you're going to discard. So that may not be what you're looking for. Maybe you want the smaller value to keep, so you might need to change this to less than.
I think the idea probably behind that was like the comparison field being the date created field or something like that, and saying, let me keep the most recent value because it's using the greater hand symbol. But if you're doing like you're suggesting, maybe you want the lesser value between the two, that would be the first record that had that same value created. So you keep the oldest and not the newest. So there's different sort of approaches, and I guess that's where you would want to compare.
Yep. Yeah. So if this was really robust, you'd maybe have like another option of how you compare which one to keep and whatnot. So this one returns the higher, and then it gives you, so this right here, if you notice, we're returning this object right here that has a keep value, key and a discard key with the different records. And then what we're doing here is we're extracting that. I'm blanking on the name for what this is. Destructuring, thank you. So we're destructuring it to basically extract it. It's kind of a shortcut There's other ways where you could just return the variable and then extract the keep and the discard out of the object. But this is a shortcut way to do it all in one line. And so now we have a variable for keep and discard. And so we're basically our discard, we're adding to an array to delete. And then our keep one, we're keeping that key value so that it's in our existing. And next time we come around, it will see that we've already got one in there. So if there's not a match, then we're just going to automatically add it to our existing object so that, or array, so that we know that it will be in there. And now, and then the other cool thing is this will now, this will print out a line. So output.markdown, this will print a line saying we've identified, 50 records that need to be deleted. And then right here, you can proceed. So this is kind of a pause, and it will basically, it won't move past this line until you click on one of the buttons, yes or no. And so your code, your script will just sit here and wait until you click on the button that I'll show once I get through this. And then it will store which button you clicked on, yes or no, inside of this decision. If you say no, then it will just print this out and you're done. If otherwise, that means you said yes, and now it's going to print this out saying. And then now we're going to do this while loop that basically will basically delete in batches all of the items that were added to our delete array, and then it will say it's done. Now I've been now this is pretty common because this max records per call, if we look up, that's defined at the top right here to 50. So that is because there's a limitation within Airtable that you can only delete or update or create batches of 50. So what you have to do is you have to do basically multiple loops of 50 at a time until you get to 50. What I typically do is I can get this down to one line, and I say like this. I use the splice command, which is similar to a slice. And so that one line right there is the same as this loop right here. So I'm going to delete that. And basically, this basically keeps going until there's none left within this delete. And the good thing about a splice, so not a slice, but a splice, is it will actually modify this array, and it will return the items 0 to 50, and then it will modify the to delete array with everything after that. So it returns 50 to get deleted, and then the to delete will be everything else. And so then it will check again and say, okay, if there's still any remaining, we'll do it again, and then this gets reduced by 50 the next time, and so on. So this right here, this single line is how I do most of my bulk updates.
Cool.
So good little key. You would think that, what's that?
I was going to say, I never can remember the difference between slice and splice because they sound so similar. And, in JavaScript, remembering which function modifies the original input versus which one returns a new array or new object or what have you, it's difficult for me. Yeah, it took me multiple times to be like, okay, which one is it? And especially, you got to be careful if you're doing deletes. You got to make sure you get the right one, because you wouldn't. Yeah, it's more disastrous with delete than update, because you could update with the same record a few times without any sort of actual problem. But if you try to delete a record that's already been deleted, it's going to throw an error.
Yeah.
Yep. We have a I was going to say we have a comment from Jen. It would be cool if you could then update the one you kept to say that there was a new or old instance of that record deleted. That I think you can do fairly easily with a, you would have to adjust the script to do it, but way up at the top when you're including, when you're filling out the sort of settings form, if you were to add a new option for, notes field or something like that, you could then add additional pieces to your code that, rounds up how many duplicates of that one record that it found, and then output some, number to that field. It's something that you could do. It would just require some tweaks to how this script is made.
Yep. Or you could select a linked record field that linked to the right one. So if you want to keep the one that you essentially would delete, but instead say, hey, this one's outdated, and link to the correct one, is kind of like a way to keep it but still link to the original.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot you could do. There are other scripts. I think I've got a script somewhere out there on BuiltOnAir that does that, where it can link like parent-child. You could kind of take that same concept with matching ones as well. So yeah, there's a lot you could do to enhance that for your specific needs, which is why it's good to learn scripting and tailor it towards your specific needs. Because everybody, even just something like this, is something that somebody's going to be like, oh, that's not what I need it to do. And so it's good to roll up your sleeves a little bit and get in here and make some changes. But these are always great starting points for how you can learn how to modify things.
Yeah.
So let's run it real quick. Let me sidebar this and see what happens when we run it. So I created 3. So these right here. So I go back to my settings.
I think I have to finish. Oh, never mind.
There we go. Yeah. So I'm using the campaigns table. So my first identifying is name and status. One thing I realized, you don't need like a second if you just want to use one field. That would be okay. But one thing that's kind of annoying about their configuration is once you select a field, you cannot unselect it. So it has to be something. I can't clear it out and say, oh, I don't want a second field.
Yeah.
So that's kind of annoying. So Airtable, try to fix that. Just put an X right there where you can clear out your selection. So anyway, so these all 3 of these have the same name and the same status. So these should all come back as duplicates. And then I'm using the budget value as the one to keep. So if this runs correctly, it should keep the 8,000 one because that's the higher, because it's you looking for the higher value. So these 2 should get deleted. So let's give it a go and we'll see where it gives us the confirmation. So it identified 2 records in need of deletion. So that means it found 3 because it's going to keep 1 and delete 2, which is what we're expecting. So I'm going to proceed and say, let me just do no first. And so there you see it just canceled and then we're out of the run. So if I run it again, and then this time I'm going to say yes. And now it deleted those 2 and kicked the 8,000 one. So it worked. We deleted our duplicates based off of 2 fields and learned a little bit about scripting in the process.
Yay.
Very good. It's always good when things work. I was worried because I did make a couple code changes, but all right, that concludes the scripting time segment. We will now move on. Camille, you're going to share your screen and we're going to talk about the button field.
Okay. I have a base that I use all the time for demonstration purposes because it has a lot sort of going on in it. There's a lot of links and whatnot. And I was going to demonstrate some of the features of the button field. And one of the sort of hidden use cases of having a button field is if you have a synced table, you'd be able to go back to the original source of wherever that record came from. So imagine, if you will, you had a table full of things associated with individual customers. And you wanted to give a particular customer their own base. One way you would do that was to make a filtered view, only show me customer 2, and you'll notice that this view is shared and has the lightning bolt on it, meaning that it's currently being synced somewhere else. That somewhere else is here. And you can see I've filtered down only the fields that I would need, showing only the things that apply to customer 2. But if I wanted to see more information about this record and, find out where, what table and base this is even coming from, it's kind of difficult to get there just by like intuition. You could go up to your table options and sort of click the sync source button to get back to the table. But the way you would get to the record itself would be to create a button field. And then you have a couple of different things. The default is an open URL, so it functions just like a URL field by default, where you would insert a formula, and that formula could just be, google.com in quotes. But for this particular use case, you want to change the option to open source record. You'll see a bunch of other options in here as well, but doing open source record will allow you to then do this. If I click that button, it will open in another tab the original table and base that is being synced to this one, and it will expand the record of the original as well. So it's super useful to get back to where a record originated from. And I believe if you make a button field in a table that is not synced, that option isn't there. Yeah, it's not there. So that's what I mean by it's sort of hidden. And I understand why it's not there by default, because it's not something that's useful for a table that isn't synced. There's no source record to go to. So, the option isn't visible, but because it's not visible most of the time, sometimes people aren't aware that it is an option whenever it is relevant. So hidden sort of use case of the button field, and some of the other options that you have in here, aside from open URL, these are all more or less variations of the same effect. So all of these buttons here will allow you to open up a new or open up your apps window off to the right and open a particular app. So some of these have been kind of custom coded to do particular things within the app itself, but most of these will just sort of open an app that you've assigned to it. I think the most common one is probably run script. So if you wanted to do the deduplication script that Dan just showed in the previous segment, you could just have a button that lets you click once and it'll start running for you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You can kind of see they're doing, they've got the Twilio integration. It's like, where do they cut off? Like having a list of a million things that you could do off of a button versus, I wonder if this will ever be extendable where you could dynamically, build things into that list or something.
I don't know, because I feel like it started off with like a couple of them, and then they added a few more, and then they added the open custom app thing, which is not necessarily a literal custom app. So this is a bad example because I only have my app in here that happens to be a custom app, but you could choose, I think, any app from the App Store that is not like a Matrix or something.
Yeah.
That's not a custom app, and it doesn't have its own little option. So
right. Or page designer, like Jen mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. So there's a lot you can do there. One of the things that I do not like, and Camille, you'll appreciate this, is in the custom app development, those buttons aren't supported. So you can't like display a button field inside of your custom app that then opens up like another app or something.
Yeah, it is. there's a thing in custom app sort of development where you can display a field in an app window exactly how it appears in a view. So like this styling for a linked record, for instance, or this styling for single selects. You can do the same with buttons. It'll look exactly like a button would look over here, except it's not clickable. It's just for display. So it's,
I think if it's open a URL, I think it will still open the URL, but
that's useful.
not any of the other ones.
Yeah, it sort of gets to an underlying sort of thing that none of these apps really talk to each other. Apps talk to your tables and records. They don't talk to other apps within the environment. That's something that you would have to get really into the sort of nitty gritty of. And I think you would have to make some adjustments to the app's environment to make that possible.
Yep. So very cool. Buttons is great. What's the biggest flaw that button needs still?
Oh, geez. For me, it's a custom apps thing where if I have a button that launches an app, just a single button, then I know what that button is supposed to do. But if I had two buttons, one for approve, one for deny or something, that are both supposed to launch an app or a script, I can't really easily say which button launched the app. So there's not really a way to say, okay, make this button do this thing, this button do another thing. They both would lead to the same place, which is a little frustrating.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say dynamic labels.
Well, that too. You know what? Never mind. So that's much more applicable to people. So if I go to here, this label would be the same label for all records. Open URL, open URL. You can't say like customer 2, commas website,
Right.
customer 3's comma website. It wouldn't be dynamic to the record itself, which is kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
That's, you can do like, you can have it build the URL based on the other fields of that particular record because it's a formula, but the label itself is not dynamic.
Yeah, that would be my number one complaint. But so Jen had a question for you. Do you need 2 apps and 2 buttons?
You could. That is one method of doing it, but I really don't like having multiple instances of the same app if I can avoid it in like dashboard design, because it kind of gets confusing if you have too many going on at once. But I mean, that is one way to do it. You can have the approve button specifically tied to the one that's on the approve dashboard. And then you could have the deny button specifically tied to the app instance on the deny dashboard. That is a workaround you could do.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Camille, sharing those insights into the button field and how people can use buttons to enhance their Airtable. Very powerful, and especially the syncing between or linking back to the source record. So let's move on. One final plug for the BuiltOnAir community. We'd love, if you're not already part of our community, sign up at builtonair.com/join. We're about 850 members inside of our Slack community, and we have a goal to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. So we need about 150 more people. So invite your friends, get them to join and participate in the discussion. There's great people in there that are always there. Jen is one of them. Glad Jen could be with us today. She's also in there and also been a great person we've had on before. Need to get her back on. So with that, our final segment that we'll do is an industry view. And we're going to talk a little bit about no code. And that's a big buzzword going around the internet right now, and how Airtable fits into that. So this is a little bit for my use purpose as well. I'm going to speak at a conference next week, and they asked me to talk about Airtable and no code and what's changing within the no code industry. So I thought we'd have kind of a little dialogue talking about what no code means and what does that mean for people that are just getting into this. So in general, so I kind of struggle with this. So I look at this as kind of a marketing buzzword of no code. I'm old enough to remember GeoCities and basically building websites, through like a GeoCity type site. And so I've been writing code for 25 plus years, and so the term no code seems interesting to me. I kind of am like, what isn't no code? What SaaS product or what software product isn't no code?
That is a really good question. It's, I think the most accessible answer for a lot of people is like, what is an example of something that is quote unquote no code is probably WordPress, because something like a quarter of the internet is built out of WordPress. And
Yep.
Most people, if you've ever had to throw together a quick website for something, you're probably at least vaguely familiar with WordPress. And they have this whole 2-minute setup thing where they ask you a few simple questions and then you click the run button and it will set up your database for you, and it will, it has pre-designed themes that you don't have to design the website from scratch necessarily. And from there, it gives you a sort of a CMS or content management system environment where you're just filling out fields essentially. For most people who use WordPress, there's no coding involved, but it's if you want to step beyond, the world of templates, or you want to customize things a little bit, or if you just want to add a touch more functionality, most people often use plugins, and plugins are coded by somebody. So no code is a strange sort of world to me, because that it seems to be a fairly common conceit of no code, is that the sort of platforms that are no code based will give you the tools to build most of what you want by yourself without, JavaScript or PHP or Java or whatever it is, until you get to a point and you hit a roadblock, and then there's something else you need. And in order to get that thing that you need, because there hasn't been an interface built for it yet, someone has to code it. It might not be you, but somebody has to make it. So no code is almost a misnomer.
Yeah. So I think, the comparison I was thinking about is, and I heard this on a podcast not too long ago, talking about like 2 to 3 years ago, the big buzzword that every company was using was big data, right? Mm-hmm. Every company was big data, although Airtable is not big data. You can't say you're big data if you only have 50,000 records. Mm-hmm. But that was the big buzzword. Everybody said, "Oh, we're big data, we're big data," and it got to the point where it's like, once everybody's saying they're big data, then what's not big data? Mm-hmm. And so I think no code is approaching that status where everybody's saying they're no code. So who's not no code?
I don't know. I think it comes back to, I like to describe it as an interface for things. No code is providing a user with an interface to do something complicated. Yeah. And Integromat is probably my favorite example, just because it's the most intuitive sort of
visual.
Yeah, I think they even call themselves visual coding or visual something or other, but you're connecting dots essentially, and you're filling out fields with just text, and it tries to ask you questions that you could answer easily. Like what is the name of the table you're looking at? What is the name of the field that you want, and where do you want it to go? Connect the dots, and it'll do the coding for you. And that's sort of the advantage of no code is that if you're completely foreign to some of these things, or even if you're not completely foreign, if you had to set up some of these systems from scratch every single time through coding, it would take you 30,000 years. You don't want to do that.
Yeah. So it's a couple comments from Jen talking about, it's basically GUI, drag and drop, a visual UI for programming. So if you've only used Airtable within their automations, the steps, that's essentially, a program that you're visualizing a trigger and then the steps that happen after it. That's essentially what Integromat does, but more advanced. So you see that within Airtable. Airtable is kind of interesting. There's another concept that Jen also mentions. There's actually a distinction between no code and low code. Airtable is kind of both, right? Because it's got no code where you're setting up, these automations and these processes and workflows in the database or through automations. But the scripting app is such a core item, element that's kind of the low code aspect of Airtable, where it lowers the barrier to write code, which I think is one of the huge advantages of Airtable. Is it definitely makes it very easy to get into scripting, and even formula writing is kind of a form of code. And so that's one of the huge pluses for Airtable.
Yeah, it's I had this kind of discussion with Ben Green and Chris Dancy, I think last week, and it was some of the frustrations I have with tools like Webflow and Bubble, which are both no code sort of interface builder type things, is that they get you to me they focus too much on building a button for everything, where if I wanted to do something that they haven't built an interface for, it's incredibly difficult. So the example with Webflow is pseudo classes. For people who know a little bit about CSS, it is way too hard to work with pseudo classes in Webflow because they haven't anticipated that need. So there's not a section of their visual website builder to do it. And that frustrates me as a designer because I want that sort of control. And Airtable's position in a low code / no code environment, they have to sort of straddle this line of, we want to make a button for as much as we need to, like they most recently added nested and grouped filters. So they've added buttons to let you do a certain amount of non-coding. Otherwise, you would have had to build a complicated script to filter records yourself. And then providing you a scripting environment or a coding environment where you can do the custom stuff that you want to do that they haven't built a button for. But when there's a path will diverge in the wood where they can go in either direction, where they become this ultra efficient, super great user interface, or they can be this perfect database platform. And then you start, the one thing that I am wary of is either side of the platform to suffer. If you focus too much on the visual interface and not on its performance as a database, like not increasing the number of records you could have, or if you focus on the number of records that you can have and less on the user interface, things are going to fall by the wayside in either time. And any no code / no code platform is going to have that same problem eventually.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. That's great insight. I do think, like, as Airtable, and I've mentioned before, hearing Howie, the CEO, talk about the vision for Airtable when it was created and even now, and, this concept of democratizing coding for everyone. Like, that's the coolest thing that I love seeing. I think you're like a perfect example of, you weren't trained as a developer or coder, but by using tools like Airtable and others that you've used, like, you've really increased your skills, and it made it easier to get into that world. The world that I got into coding, I had to go through schooling and getting a server set up and everything that you have to do versus what you have to do with Airtable. It's just night and day. And so lowering that bar, making it easier for everybody to jump into this world. That's what I love seeing. And you see that people who have no experience writing code, they'll ask questions in the forums, and you see that they're getting better and they're understanding it through Airtable. It just makes it so much easier to get up and running.
Yep. One of my favorite things to see on the forums is someone will have like a script that they've seen somewhere and they're customizing it for themselves, and they're so close to a script that runs properly. And the problem that they're having isn't necessarily Airtable, it's just JavaScript. It's like they're missing a colon somewhere. And I'm like, that's what I want to see. Someone who's gone through the process of, oh, I know what pieces of this script don't really apply to my use case. I know this piece of that script does. Let me try and combine them. And for the most part, I think the position Airtable is in right now is friendly enough that people are not, oh, that window's not for me. I'm not a coder. It's not, not having to run to hire a developer every time you need some button to do something.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see. And, if I have to suffer through JavaScript, everyone should.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing. So my takeaway is, even though I'm kind of pessimistic on the term no code and kind of the buzzword marketing aspect to it, I don't think that it will. I think it'll go away because it'll kind of lose its power once everybody's using it, which is pretty close to. But if you think of it from a philosophical way, and not necessarily these are the tools that are no code, but thinking like no code philosophically, I think that's powerful in the sense that you don't need to pay tens of thousands of dollars and high-end developers to build your idea. You can get up and going as quickly as tomorrow without those skill sets. So that's what I think the philosophy of no code means, is making it easier for anybody to get up and going. And then the other thing is the ability to have different platforms talk to each other. So that I think is very new. Like before the Zapiers and the Integromats of the world, some systems talk to each other directly. They had direct integrations, but there wasn't like an easy way to really be able to connect the dots like Legos between different systems. So
a lot of silos.
Lots of silos. And so you couldn't build a full product, that did everything, and that would be super expensive. So the no code philosophy of, this system does this, we can get it hooked up into this other system that does this. Now you have a full business running on these systems that can talk to each other and not have code involved. So that's the biggest.
Yeah. I love Priscilla's first comment. I was first introduced to coding my sophomore year in college in an honors computer science class and engineering department. Needless to say, I was way over my head and I was very intimidated. I very famously, in my family, I was admitted to college in the computer, I think engineering. It was either computer science or computer engineering as my degree. And in the orientation week before school starts, they're like, come to campus and, see your facilities and whatnot. And I remember being so looking around and being like, I don't want to be here. Ew. I don't want to do computer science. And so I changed my major before school even started. And I remember I think she was either the dean or the program director, but she was just like, no, please stay. I don't remember the exact makeup. Priscilla says there was only one other woman in her class of 20. I couldn't tell you how many women there were in my class. There weren't a lot, but here I am 6 years later.
Yeah.
Well, longer than 6 years. That would have been, how old am I? Oh no. That was 2013, 2012 or 2013. And here I am 6 years later and I make apps for a living somehow. Yeah. So, to whoever that dean lady was, I don't know. I came around. Sorry.
I think, yeah, I mean, I did a master's in computer science 20 plus years ago. And yeah, I'm sure it was the same numbers. It was mostly nerdy guys like me. And that is one thing that's really cool about Airtable is the amount of women that are in this environment and doing
Yeah.
coding and scripting. Like the representation is much higher than industry average, I
I
would say.
think it is, again, I go back to the amount of people who just feel comfortable coding in the environment like of Airtable is just so nice to see. They've put it's perfectly nestled in this fairly easy to use platform, and um, Airtable is built off of JavaScript, and so the scripting app uses JavaScript. It is such a widely used uh, coding language that it's not hard to find tutorials from many different skilled tutorial writers. And then you get people like Kavan, friend of the show, and you get people like me who kind of coded a little bit. I mean, we're loosely associated with code. Me, who dropped out of the computer science major before I even started. And we've since, been able to learn within this very incredibly niche little market in roughly the span of a year. It's a nice sort of place that we've gotten to. No code at this point is the gateway drug into coding.
There we go. No code is the gateway. There's my punchline for my presentation.
There you go. I'm going to charge you royalties.
All right. All right. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, even just looking at, our community here who's responding is all women. That's awesome. So
Yay.
that, it's cool. I'm the minority in this group. So that's good. So that. It's powerful. I think that will change. I mean, that I use Airtable. So all of my kids, I've got 2 daughters and 2 sons, and all of them for their science fair projects, I make them do coding projects. And the first one, my oldest daughter, she did hers before I was using Airtable, but the rest since they've all done their science projects in Airtable. And it's a great way for kids to get into coding.
Yeah.
So a couple more comments before we end here. Appreciate all the feedback, Priscilla and Jen. And yeah, so there we go. Maslow's hierarchy, low code is the gateway to coding.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Great discussion. I think, it's cool to see it. And that's where Airtable, like, if they're smart, I've actually told them like they need to be like Apple, where Apple got into all the schools early, and got people using Apple products. Like Airtable needs to get into schools and be how they learn database design and coding.
They kind of made a half step in terms of during COVID, they had that, I think it was even slightly before COVID, where they just made Airtable free for education users and had this sort of like push and all that kind of things. I think if they continue on that path and, trying to get it. So I think the first thing I used Airtable for was like a school-based project anyway. It's such a, no one wants to build an SQL query to deal with a college assignment or a high school assignment, or, even less so a middle school assignment. So get in early.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that concludes this episode. We went a little long, but I think that's that's a good discussion that maybe we'll pick up another time. I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. So appreciate your input. Camille, good to see you again. Thank you, Jen and Priscilla and all those that listened in live. And until next time, we want to see what you've built on air. Please share with us, join our community, and come join us on the show. We'd love to see what you've built on air. Talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.